George Hay was the acid bath murderer. When his warehouse in West Sussex was raided by the English police in 1949, they discovered 40-gallon drums along with multiple containers of concentrated sulfuric acid. And that wasn't all they found on his property. He also had 28 pounds melted human body fat, all of which he had collected from his horrifying acid bath. His first victim was William McSwan, a local slumlord. George lured William into a basement, hit him over the head, and then dumped him in a drum of sulfuric acid. When the victim had become nothing more than sludge, George poured his remains down a manhole. He then took over William's duty as landlord and started raking in serious cash. George committed 5 murders in this fashion before he was caught dissolving his 6th and final victim, Olive Duran Deacon, a wealthy widow whom he lured to his warehouse. But the police were already investigating him, and when they searched his warehouse following them, they found her remains in a bucket. He was sentenced to death and was executed on August 10, 1949. Number 9. Karl Denke. Karl Denke was born in the Kingdom of Prussia to a wealthy family of farmers in the late 1800s. But somewhere along the line, this ordinary garden worker had something snap inside his head. In 1903, Karl killed a woman named Ida Lorna. A notebook was discovered with 31 names written in it, and some experts have guessed he may have murdered upwards of 42 people. He killed indiscriminately, uncaring of gender or social status. All he cared about was the meat. But his last victim, Vincenz Olivier, escaped and identified him. When the police went to Karl's home, they discovered the belongings of over 12 random people and a pair of drums holding massive chunks of human meat. Number 8. Steve Wright. Steve Wright is a notorious English serial killer, one of the most hated men alive in the United Kingdom. He went on an unbelievable killing spree in the Ipswich area between October 30th and December 10th, 2006. In rapid succession, he murdered Tanya Nicol, Gemma Adams, Anneli Alderton, Paula Clennell, and Annette Nichols, all between the ages of 19 and 29. They were also sex workers, women Steve viewed as easy victims. His killing spree was so horrifying, the town was nearly locked down. People were scared to go out at night until this guy was caught. Thankfully, the police did catch up to him. In 2008, he was convicted of all 5 murders and given life in prison. Now it looks like he'll be convicted of yet another murder, this one from 22 years ago. The death of Victoria Hall is one of many unsolved murders Steve is linked to. Number 7. Stephanie St. Clair. Stephanie St. Clair was the queen of numbers in the 1930s. It was in 1912 that Stephanie moved to New York City from Canada. By the early 1920s, she had started her numbers business in Harlem, setting up a system of illegal lotteries. People could bet on specific numbers, then hand those bets over to what they called bankers. The bankers would bring the bets back to headquarters, and then everyone waited for the winning numbers to come in for that day. It was the exact same thing as the lottery, only run illegally by a single woman in Harlem. Stephanie made a personal fortune of over $500,000 very quickly. That equals about $8 million in today's currency. But then in 1938, she was convicted for attempted murder for trying to kill her contract husband. After she got out of prison, Stephanie took her fortune and retired in seclusion. She did what almost no other gangster of the 1930s was able to do. She cashed in her chips and got out. Number 6. Patrick Kearney. Patrick Kearney, also known as the Trash Bag, is one of the most terrifying humans who ever lived. As a young boy, he slaughtered pigs with his father. He was occasionally caught rolling around in the intestines of pigs just for fun. In 1962, Patrick picked up a hitchhiker on his motorcycle. He drove the young man to a secluded location and murdered him. Patrick then killed 2 more people that year. He killed again in 1967 in Tijuana. Police chased after him for nearly 6 years and finally made the arrest in 1977. Patrick confessed to 35 murders and was given life in prison. He's still alive today at the Mule Creek State Prison, considered one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. Number 5. Melissa Ann Shepard. Melissa Ann Shepard is one of the most notorious criminals in recent Canadian history. One of her victims was Alex Strategos, divorced and in his 70s. He was living in Florida when he met Melissa on a dating website, and she flew to Florida to meet him. He went for dinner, and then Melissa called 911. Alex randomly passed out and had to be taken to the hospital. He was in such bad shape that Melissa agreed to move into his home and take care of him. But Alex never got better, and nobody could figure out why. Doctors finally did some blood tests. Melissa was drinking his ice cream and also stealing his money. By the time anyone figured out what was happening, she had already stolen $18,000 from the man. This was not Melissa's first incident with fraud and attempted murder. She ran over and killed her husband Stuart in 1991 and claimed it was an accident. She also murdered her next husband Dennis Friedrich in 2002. Luckily, the family caught Melissa before she could kill Alex, and she was given 4 years in jail. She was 74 years old when she got out in 2009. Shortly after, she was arrested by the Canadian police for poisoning Fred Weeks, whom she had just gotten married to. Melissa Ann Shepherd is currently a free woman living in Nova Scotia. Number 4. The Grimsby Hangman. Harry Kirk was the Grimsby Hangman, the notorious executioner whose job was to carry out death sentences. He was the one who executed the acid bath murderer and many others. He was even behind the botched execution of Norman Goldthorpe. Even though Harry isn't seen in history's eyes as a murderer, he was the one who put over 40 condemned men and women to death. Number 3. Charles Bronson. Charles has been described as the most violent prisoner in Britain. He was convicted of armed robbery in 1974 when he was only 22 years old and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. But he didn't get out until 1987. Time continued to be added onto his sentence for fighting and attacking prison officers. His brief time out of jail was spent as a bare-knuckle boxer in London. But he only lasted until 1988, when he was given 7 years yet again for another robbery. He was let out in 1992, spent 50 days free, then was arrested yet again for conspiracy to rob. Everything went really sour in 1999, when Charles took the prison teacher Phil Danielson prisoner and held him hostage for 44 hours. This earned Charles a life sentence and cemented his place as the most notorious prisoner in Britain. He's still there right now, incarcerated at HM Prison, Woodhill. Number 2. Arnold Rothstein. Arnold Rothstein was a notorious criminal in the era of Prohibition. Arnold started out with small-time stuff, acting as a loan shark and making money through gambling. He eventually climbed the ladder and became a fixer, someone who kept the peace between the criminals and the police. He also became a legendary gambler who supposedly rigged most of the games he bet on. Arnold's gambling ultimately gave him enough capital to invest in racetracks, to open his own casino in Manhattan, and to become a millionaire at 30 years old. But Arnold Rothstein truly became an infamous criminal when he fixed the 1919 World Series. He was behind bribing White Sox players to take dives, thereby throwing the game so that the Cincinnati Reds won. Arnold cleaned up, making over $350,000. Then, when Prohibition began the year after, he immediately started making big bucks in the booze business. But he had too many enemies. He walked into a poker game and was shot to death on November 6, 1928. Number 1. Belle Starr. She was a frightening outlaw and maniac criminal in the days of the Wild West. She took the name Belle Starr after marrying Sam Starr in 1880. He was part of the and a native Cherokee. They lived on Cherokee land together, consorted with criminals like Jesse James, mostly stealing horses, and Belle was arrested once for stealing horses and spent 9 months in a Detroit jail. Her criminal husband Sam was shot down in 1886, and Belle moved in with another man named Bill July. But in 1889, Belle was shot to death by an unknown individual. She had cultivated quite a few enemies over the years, including her own son and daughter, and to this day, nobody knows who hunted her down like an assassin.